So not so long ago, I did a video about how many miniatures you could print off using one bottle of 1 kilogram resin. And a few of you asked how many big miniatures, so bigatures, let's go with that, can you print off using one bottle? And in this video, we're gonna find out. Now, to make this video happen, the kind team over at Mammoth Factory Games gave me a whole selection of STLs to choose from, and I had a really good time trying to decide which ones I was gonna print off. More on them later in the video. Let's get straight to it and see how many of them we can print off. Now, obviously, this isn't gonna be the most scientific video, so don't come at me in the comments saying, oh, you're not bearing in mind all the other costs that you've got, including like your IPA for cleaning and your electricity for running the printer. That's not what this is about. It's just a fun video to see how many we can kind of print off using just this one bottle. Now, for this, I went with my trusty ABS Light Resin by Elgu. I really like it. I probably shouldn't be kind of shaking it around so much because they kind of can be known for the kind of tops cracking off and shooting. So just pop that aside for now before I end up like blinding myself or something like that. Bottle hasn't been opened yet or anything, so don't worry about the seal and me getting resin on myself, so yeah. Now obviously this is gonna be a bit of an odd one because how big is big and how small is too small. Now luckily for you guys in the audience, I'm very used to measuring things in millimeters, so don't worry too much about things being a little bit too large. But first off, let's kick off with perhaps the smallest one, and that is this little Shroom King. I think he's really cool. Now, with some of these, I've printed off the bases. Some of them I haven't, so I will cover that off so that way we get I guess, a truer representation of what I actually managed to print off. So the first one I did was this Shroom King. I'll have a couple of kind of size comparisons in the B-roll so you can get an idea of what he actually looks like. But this is it, compared to my head. He's pretty big, I think. So he's all printed off, primed, comes off in one go. And with this one, I didn't print off the base. I just had one kicking about and he kind of stuck it down using my normal basing materials. And he looks really cool. He's a pretty big beastie thing, really. If you have him on the game table, if you have him with some of your D&D models, he's pretty large in himself. Now, before we move on to the next one, why do people really care about how many big miniatures you can print off? And I suppose because of my last video, you got an idea of what sort of cost it was going to be to print off like an army of miniatures or a decent sized squad or a regiment or something like that. And when it comes down to getting large miniatures, they can be pretty expensive. And I suppose it's because normally the go-to one is something like Games Workshop, and you tend to be paying for points costs rather than necessarily the plastic used. So they can start to rack up quite a huge bill. I've always been really surprised when I look at the cost of them. They'll have some incredible sculpts over at Games Workshop, but some of them are astronomically expensive. So it makes sense that people will be curious, how many of these you could print off as like a comparison to that. So that is number one. So we've managed to print off one relatively large mini. The next one is this thing. I really like this. This looks really cool. It looks like, I don't know, it's a cross between loads of different genres. So to me, it looks like something from Doom. Then got face-huggered and a xenomorph burst out of him, and he just looks like some kind of weird demon-y tentacle creature as well. It's like loads of things mashed into one. He looks really interesting, so he's got these sort of like tentacles coming off with these like suckers and grips. This kind of almost like insectile like tail, just looks really weird. Now with this one, I didn't print off the base like with that. I printed off this obelisk though that comes with him. So his normal base that he's meant to come with, you get the obelisk and then you get kind of a larger base, but I just figured I would use a standard one. But the obelisk is it's not hollowed out or anything like that. And point of reference, actually, this first one is hollow, so just bear that in mind. And then I used some polystyrene just to kind of give him an extra brick there. But again, he's pretty big, this head size comparison, I might have a massive head and these are actually just really massive, or I might have a really tiny head. No one's seen me in real life. Well, some people have, you lot haven't. So there we go, that's kind of his head size comparison. So that is number two. And again, pretty decent sized. So can we get another one? Of course we can. And of course, it's going to be a dragon. This one I did print off the base with, so a relatively large base. It's got this kind of like obviously big rock coming out of it and the second rock coming out of it. When we do the B-roll and the close-ups, you'll probably notice that the second rock has this chip out of it. That's just where I kind of, I don't know, I had failure in terms of the base support. I didn't want to reprint it because it was looking pretty good anyway and I can work with that. But again, really cool sculpt. You've got this dragon. It comes in two separate poses. So one with the head like kind of down, one with it up. So it looks like it's kind of roaring to the sky and blasting out some fire. So you've got the big wings. Head size comparison. There we go. Just throwing that out there for you. I really like this one. I think this is one of my favorite ones by them, and I just really like dragons, so can't really go too far wrong with that one. Base is all hollowed out as well. So that's why we've got that kind of crack in the top there. It means you save on some of the resin, but you still get the size. It's still pretty weighty. And yeah, this thing is really cool. There we go. If we pop them down next to, so we've got Demon Doom Guy, and next to King of the Shrooms. Can't go wrong with that. So that's 3. The question is, can we get 4? We can. At this point, I just want to point out, I was almost scraping the resin when I was kind of looking at how much it was going to take off in the slicer versus how much resin was left in my tank and in the bottle. It was touch and go. I wasn't too sure if I was going to pull this one off. So here we have him. Now, originally, I didn't print off the base for this. This thing is, I don't even know what this is, but it's really, really cool. So originally I just went with the kind of like snake worm thing. And I wasn't going to print off the base because, like I said, it was getting a bit touch and go as to whether or not I'd have enough resin. I just about had enough, so I printed it off and I put all this sort of like basing material around the bottom as well. This is, I mean, I could kill somebody with this. It's really heavy. No wonder it used up almost all my remaining resin. It is this big snake-like creature with this barbarian looking guy riding on top of him, because why not? The chain this guy is holding onto is monumentally large, so no wonder he looks like he's been carved from stone. But this is a really, really cool sculpt. Out of them, I absolutely love the dragon just because I love dragons, but this, I have no idea what I'd use it for. Apart from maybe a D&D campaign from Mammoth Factory. But it's so cool. I was really taken by it. It's one of the first ones I tried printing off because it's really interesting. And it's called like Season the Day. It's like, to me, it seems like a play on words. Might not be. It might be reading into things, but I like it. And it's so heavy. This isn't hollowed out. I could use this for self-defense. It's incredible. So, 4 pretty large models. Now, obviously, when it comes to 3D printing, you can go larger. You could print something even bigger than these, and then you can print less of them. Or you could go smaller and you could print off more of them. So like I said, it's not scientific at all. But in terms of tabletop, relatively large monsters or bosses for D&D, you're gonna get about 4 of them. Maybe 5 if you hollowed something like this out, and then you could maybe get another miniature instead. So again, this hopefully will give you an idea as to how many you can print off, rather than just being limited to the small like 28, 32mm type models if you're gonna go for something larger instead. I was quite surprised that I got this many off. I thought I was gonna end up with 3. And especially when I got to the slicer and I looked at it in Chitu box and I was like, I don't know if I've got enough resin. And I risked it and it worked out all right. Fortunately, I had no failures apart from the base on this dragon. So obviously I said with the rocket kind of like not formed properly. If I'd had failures, that's a lot of resin to potentially lose out. You know, if this prints halfway and stops, you're gonna lose a lot of resin. So again, that's worthwhile bearing in mind. I've kind of dialed in my settings enough now that I don't normally get that many failures apart from when my FEP needs changing, or FEP, I never know how to say that. But yeah, if you are gonna get failures, that's just something to bear in mind. That can then suddenly suck up a whole load of resin versus something like your normal 28 or 32mm miniature. If that fails, it's not really too much of a biggie. It's a bit frustrating, but at least you don't lose loads of resin like you would with something like this. Most of them come in parts as well. These two didn't really, apart from the rider and this sort of like banner. He was basically printed off in one go. Dragon came off, I think it's in like 4 separate parts. The wings are separate, the neck's separate, the body is. And then this Doom dude, I really like him. He's so random. Looks so cool, probably work for like a Chaos Army or something like that. He came off, I think it was in 2 parts, so like his bottom half and then his top half. They all came pre-supported as well, so that worked for me. And again, depending on how good you are with supports, you could probably do them non-supported and put your own supports on it, use less supports than what Mammoth Factory send about with. I'm all for support, so I'm not gonna risk that because I will have a hell of a lot of failures doing it that way. So let me know, this sort of scale, this sort of size, how many have you managed to print off? Have you managed to push the limits and do something bigger, less supports, and print off absolutely loads of them? Be interesting to know. Let me know your average sort of models that you kind of print off. Throw it down in the comments below so anybody else who's interested, at least they can get an idea as how many they could be expecting in the future. So thank you very much to Mammoth Factory for sending these over. They are really cool. And Mammoth Factory are well and truly worthwhile checking out. They do a monthly set on Patreon where you get all the STLs for all the models. You also get a D&D adventure with that, with all the rules, the story. It's all really, really well thought out and worthwhile checking out. And they have just launched a Kickstarter where you can get like all of their models that they've done as part of their Kickstarter, so go check it out, see whether or not it takes your fancy. If you're a D&D player, you cannot go too far wrong with their sculpts. They're pretty damned awesome. Question is, will I be painting them? And of course, I like setting myself a challenge. I'm going to be trying to do these in like 2 days. I'll probably have less hair by the end of it, so I'll see you for that video. In the meantime, any questions, throw them down below. Head over to the Discord channel where you can share, chat with fellow hobbyists, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Ah!